I'd asked my parents for something, as you do, and they said, no, we cannot afford it. And I was pretty miffed about this. I was pretty upset I couldn't get that thing I wanted. And I clearly remember going to sit in my room on my bed thinking, when I get older, I am not going to struggle for money. I didn't know all the ins and outs of my parents' finances at all, but in hindsight, I can see that they were not that great. And I just thought, I'm going to work this out and I'm going to be wealthy one day. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's going to be my reality. And like many late starters, it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back as I learned and learned. But eventually, we're drawing ever closer, tantalizingly close to complete financial independence now. I would consider myself a late starter because despite the epiphany at the age of 14, I didn't know where to go, where to look for that information. And so I sort of bumbled on through life as people tend to do. And I went off to university and I got a student loan. And then later I met my husband Johnny and we were both working full time, and the natural next step is to buy a house, etc. So we kind of lived a pretty average life by the rule book that we'd read. And it was when we got a mortgage, when I was in my late 20s, we're in our late 20s, that was the first real debt I'd had. Like I did used to have a student loan. I think the key is community. Like it's finding people who are where you want to go. And like when I was saying to Jackie before, if I sat down with her, I want to learn what made her successful. And it's very easy to walk out your front gate and talk to people who are like, oh, Trump's in charge, the economy's this, everybody's a bit down on their luck. There's plenty of them out there. Stop talking to those people. Find the people like you two, like myself, who are happy, who are achieving the goals they've set themselves, and all of our goals are different, and surround yourself with people who are going to places where you want to be. That's what I would say to people.
Welcome to Catching Up to Fi, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to Fi together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to Fi. I'm here with Jackie in the warm and sunny summer of the U.S., and we're talking today with Ruth the Happy Saver, who's down under, not really down under, because she's in Kiwi land in New Zealand, where it's winter, it's white outside, and it's -5 degrees. I'm kind of glad I'm here, right, Jackie?
Oh, certainly am. I did not realize that New Zealand was having winter when we were having summer. So we learn something new every day. And that's why this series about Borderless Fi is so cool. So we've got a really cool person today, Ruth the Happy Saver. We're going to learn a lot about New Zealand today.
Yeah, let me introduce her because you may not have heard of the Happy Saver, but Fi is different and similar all over the world. And we're here to learn about some of the similarities and differences about how Fi and FIRE and financial literacy and independence look in New Zealand. Ruth is the creator of the Happy Saver, a beloved New Zealand blog and podcast that brings personal finance down to earth. With a background in office administration and a passion for financial independence and a balanced life and approach to money, Ruth transitioned from part-time work to full-time content creation, sharing her journey towards early retirement with honesty, humor, and heart. She's known for her practical advice, relatable storytelling, and a deep commitment to helping everyday Kiwis feel confident about money. Whether she's unpacking KiwiSaver strategies, answering listener questions, or spotlighting debt-free and millionaire journeys, Ruth's content is refreshingly jargon-free and grounded in real life. She's built a thriving community by being approachable, transparent, and fiercely committed to financial education. One blog post, one podcast episode, and email reply at a time. So Ruth, it's good to see you again. Welcome to Catching Up to Fi. Ki ora.
Oh, beautifully said. Kia ora to both of you as well. It is an absolute honour and delight to be on your podcast and to see your beautiful smiling faces this morning, because of course it is the morning here in New Zealand and it is into the evening where you are.
Well, the funny thing is, we were just on the same program with the Verbal Finance School with Katie and Alan Donegan, where they did a simulation of stock market volatility that was just so much fun. And you're going to be on their show next week. Tell us a little bit about what happened today and what you're doing with them next week, because we were on their show or in their school, so to speak, as well.
You certainly were. I love that episode as well. So I started following the Donegans. It would be about 6 years ago, just at the very beginnings of what they now call Rebel Finance School. And year upon year, so 6 years in total, every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. here in New Zealand, I get up and I watch their live 10-week series. And this morning, Bill, of course, we were doing volatility training, which was a hilarious, action-packed ride trying to help us, the audience, learn about share market investing and all the ups and downs of it and to ultimately stay the course. So this session this morning was particularly fun. I was laughing out loud a lot of the ways. So it's pretty cool that way, way down under at the bottom of the world here, when it comes to personal finance, you can still tap into, they're in the UK, you guys are in America. Like, it really is a global team that we've managed to build up, which I'm pretty passionate about.
Yeah, I agree. And Jackie's going to Bali. I'm going to South Africa. We're going to have to do shows from there. The fact that we have the internet in this virtual space to discuss the similarities and differences of our own personal stories and financial differences with regards to our systems is really a joy. And so it's really fun to have you on the show today. But you know what? We want to start, because people don't really know who you are yet, with something like, what is your first memory of money? And then we'll bring them up to the present, up to speed with Ruth the Happy Saver.
Probably lots of money memories. The clearest to me was sitting as a teenager. I would have been 14 years old, living at home, got 5 siblings. A couple of them had left home by then. And I'd asked my parents for something, as you do, and they said, no, we cannot afford it. And I was pretty miffed about this. I was pretty upset I couldn't get that thing I wanted. And I clearly remember going to sit in my room on my bed thinking, when I get older, I am not going to struggle for money. I didn't know all the ins and outs of my parents' finances at all, but in hindsight, I can see that they were not that great. And I just thought, I'm going to work this out and I'm going to be wealthy one day. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that's going to be my reality. And like many late starters, it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back as I learned and learned. But eventually, we're drawing ever, ever closer, tantalizingly close to complete financial independence now. And the reason I started the Happy Saver, which was 9 years ago that I started it now, was as I was discovering things, I'd say to Johnny, my husband, oh my gosh, I've just learned about an index fund, an ETF fund, et cetera, et cetera. Why didn't we know about this? How do we go about this? And he says, Ruth, if you're learning about this and clearly quite passionate about it, he said, why don't you create a blog and you can share what you're learning with other Kiwis? So that's how it started. And the blog's really been my evolution as I've learned about money. That's what it remains to this day, that each time I release a new blog, which is every fortnight I try to do, this is what I'm doing with my money. These are the reasons why I'm doing it. This is what I've learned. Now, think about what you're doing with yours and compare it to mine, and then you make your own choices. And so by doing that, I get 1 million emails to my inbox, and people ask me questions and I just answer them. And just day by day, month by month, and year by year, the knowledge is growing here in New Zealand. And I'm a part of that, which I'm pretty proud to say.
So, Ruth, I'm always curious about how you learned all of this stuff to the point where you created a blog and you started helping all these other people. Like, what was your learning curve like?
Internet. And I was probably the same as you guys. Internet brought me to Mr. Money Mustache, to JL Collins, and that took me to books and tools and resources. And then I thought I'd better speak to some actual humans. So I thought I'd find myself a financial advisor, which was fascinating. I do not use a financial advisor. One thread led to another, and I just followed every lead, basically. And I'm a pretty common sense person, so I kind of could read, speak to somebody, watch something, and make my own sense of that. When I did speak to a financial advisor who I could see that they were giving me terrible advice, and that led me to thinking about fees and what do I need to know about fees. And so I just cracked the lid and just started going through every piece of information I found, following it to its natural conclusion. And I went off in all these directions, which ultimately got me on the path I'm on today. So that's how I found out. It all starts with a question, and I just kept asking a heck of a lot of questions, basically.
Well, you mentioned American resources. You didn't mention any Kiwi resources, which I find fascinating. And in our last conversation, you talked about the fact that there just weren't that many. Is that still true?
It's improving, but it's probably much like America. So I read all the American stuff, and of course your 401ks and etc. Well, I know what you're talking about now, but back then I didn't. So coming back to New Zealand, we do have a very good government-run website called Sorted, and so that's kind of a good base information. And we do have a couple of Kiwis who for many years have spoken independently about money, but by and large over here, the information we hear is coming from companies. And so there weren't when I started, but there are now other blogs and podcasts, but they're predominantly run by investment companies or various financial businesses. So it's still the case over here that it's difficult to find people who just say it how it is. And that's kind of what I try to do. I'm not paid by anybody. I'm not kind of aligned to anybody. So it has improved, Bill, but we still have a way to go.
Yeah. There's not that many independent voices out there like yours?
No.
You're a fire starter. And I do find that very interesting because if you were mainly using American resources and American independent financial influencers or educators like us, that means you had to decipher when we were talking about things like 401ks, you had to figure out what was the New Zealand equivalent. And I guess one of the other things that I know is always an issue that we hear Americans talk about is like the health insurance piece. So what's the landscape of that where you're at in New Zealand? Because it's very different in America. And so that was a piece that you probably had to say, oh, this is very different.
Yes. Health insurance here is nothing. We cannot compare ourselves to you. We're completely different. I worked out from all the American resources and some British ones that the basics are the same globally. You live on less than you make, you stick to a budget, you have an emergency fund, you think about retirement savings, and then once I discovered financial independence, you think about saving a pot of money which isn't locked away for retirement. And so when it came to the insurance piece, the health insurance piece, New Zealand has a universal healthcare system. So like if I walked outside here today and fell over and broke my leg, I'd call an ambulance, it would come and get me, it would take me to the hospital, it would fix me up, and I would come back home, and that's that. There might be a little bit of outlay, a few dollars here and there, but the taxpayers all chip in to keep the population healthy in total. We do have health insurance here, but you can absolutely live your life without it. So Johnny and I do carry some health insurance, and what that does, it speeds up the process. So for example, if I visited my doctor and they said, look, you really need to go and see a specialist, I could go into the government system and wait for that appointment, or I could go to my health insurance provider and get to see a specialist more quickly. So I like to have a little bit of insurance to speed things up, but equally I've got a mother who's really ill. She's lived with cancer for 7-8 years, something like that, and she's still alive. She gets on just fine, and her healthcare is free of charge. Yeah. So it's quite different. So we don't have to factor in to the degree that you do healthcare. And the insurance that we do have is completely independent of our employer. I know that you guys are tied to your employers, which is, I just can't fathom that system. So here, like many, many years ago when I started my corporate career, I got health insurance with them. When I left them, well, it's in my name. It just comes with me. And then my husband Johnny's on it, our daughter's on it, and that sort of thing as well. So it really isn't a consideration to a great degree for us at all.
Yeah, we're going to get into a lot more similarities and differences. But before we do, I want to hear a bit more about the fact that would you have considered yourself a late starter too with regards to finances, or because of your wake up when you were 14, did you get everything right and you were well on your way? or did things not necessarily go according to plan with regards to your finances?
I would consider myself a late starter because despite the epiphany at the age of 14, I didn't know where to go, where to look for that information. And so I sort of bumbled on through life as people tend to do. And I went off to university and I got a student loan. And then later I met my husband, Johnny, and we were both working full time. And the natural next step is to buy a house, etc. So we kind of lived a pretty average life by the rule book that we'd read. And it was when we got a mortgage, when I was in my late 20s, or in our late 20s, that was the first real debt I'd had. Like I did used to have a student loan, but here's another fun fact. Student loans in New Zealand are completely interest-free while you live in the country. They are government student loans, so they're backed by the taxpayer. So I could go to study for 3 years for a university degree and put that on student loans. And when you finish and you get a job, once you earn above a certain level, they'll take 12% of your paycheck to pay your student loan until eventually it's paid off. You can pay it off quickly, more quickly. You can pay it off in a lump sum. The only time you pay interest on it is if you go overseas for longer than 6 months, in which case they'll put 4.9% interest on it. But for by and large Kiwis, if we get an education and we do get a student loan, they stay in the country. So interest-free, they pay it off. So I paid off my student loan, we got a mortgage, and that's when the bank said, all right, give us a large chunk of every single paycheck that you make. And I thought, oh, I just don't like this feeling of giving all this money away. And so it's kind of like we executed a very slow U-turn, Bill, where we became aware of other things we could do with our money. And because we were both reasonably high income for New Zealand, no children, we kind of made more money than we ever needed, which meant that our mortgage just naturally got paid off faster because it's like, oh, I've got another $5,000 in the bank account. I'll pay more. And then as we got closer to the end of it, I'm like, I hate this. I want it done. And so we paid off our house mortgage in 5 years, which was pretty quick. And it was after that, of course, your paycheck stays in your bank account and it starts to grow. And you're like, what am I going to do with this? And it was that, and that was in my early 30s, that really led me to growing my knowledge. Because I went to my bank, because that's where the bank, they have all the knowledge, right? They handle money. They know all about money. So I literally had an interview with them and I said, well, what do I do with it now? And they said, well, go and buy another house. Like, we'll give you the lending, go out, buy another house, rent the house out to somebody else, and then the rent will pay the mortgage off over the next 20 years. Then buy another one. And I said to the banker, I said, I don't want another house. I just blooming paid mine off. I do not want another mortgage. I don't want to be a landlord, etc. And so they said, oh, well, we do have an alternative for you, and that is to buy in managed funds. So I started buying and investing with my bank. And there was a conversation about fees one day that I heard on some blog or podcast or something. And that, when I said before, where I heard something and I started digging into fees, and mind blown. So off I went to argue with my bank about what the fees were. And they just would not tell me, and they didn't have to disclose what the fees were back then. And so it just got me curious, and that led me to J.L. Collins, A Simple Path to Wealth, and the whole fees thing. And then from there, it was like catching up. I had a lot of catching up to do. And so I would say that our proper journey didn't begin until our mid-30s, and I'm 51 now.
It's interesting that the bank recommended buy another house. Now, there is a story with regards to real estate investing and the stock market in New Zealand in particular. I remember from a conversation we had prior to this. Why would the bank recommend you buy another house as opposed to invest in shares? And there's a particular New Zealand story there, I think.
Yes. So, I mean, of course, what does a bank do? They lend money out. How does a bank make money? By lending money out. In their best interest for me to stay in debt so I can keep paying the bank. And in New Zealand, there is a particular love affair with property, and the experts on this say it stems from the 1987 share market crash that we had. It was leading up to that. Everybody was hearing about shares. All these companies are going up in value. Hot market. Get into it. And so New Zealanders did. They piled into the share market but a little bit like 2020 with no idea of what they were doing. Auntie at the barbecue said, wow, I've heard about this top company, you should buy it. And that's what they did. And then when the share market crashed in 1987, New Zealand was particularly impacted, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. And it was because they'd speculated, they'd literally bet the farm and lost money. And so from that, people thought, bricks and mortar, I can see them, I can touch them. That's where I'm going to invest my money instead. And so that pushed people to a safe, and I'm quoting for those air quotes, for those listening to this on a podcast, to a safe investment, safe as houses, etc. And ever since then, there's just been this love affair with property. So that is why when I went to the bank, they were like, well, everybody else is doing it. This is pretty obvious. And why would they not mention shares? It's like, well, they deal in debt. They want to sell me some debt sort of thing. One last thing. At that time, we didn't have the options that we have today. And so I always say people do what they do with the information they have. When I read J.L. Collins and heard about index funds, I thought, wow, this sounds amazing. But I bet we don't have it in New Zealand. And so I had to go digging around to find that specific investment here. And they are here in the form of ETF funds.
I just find it fascinating because it reminds me like maybe prior to the housing bubble in 2008, when everybody and their mother was buying houses. And that was the thing to do. And unfortunately, it did lead to the financial crisis and all of that. But one thing that stuck with me that you're talking about, Ruth, is you are very curious. So even though you didn't know everything, you're just learning. And I always tell people, I'm like, just get curious about your money. So you got really, really curious. And even though where you lived, all the way in New Zealand, it wasn't a lot of resources, you found ways to do it. And you had to connect what the equivalent was, whatever you were learning in the US from J.L. Collins, Mr. Money Mustache, you had to find the New Zealand equivalent and going to big institutions like banks and things like that. Yeah, in the US, those are probably not the best places to go. But you figure that out. And now I see how all those things that you learn, now you're able to share it with your listeners, with the rest of the people in New Zealand. So kudos to you for being the trailblazer in New Zealand. As you started to grow your wealth, so you've got the blog and the podcast going on, and you're starting to grow your wealth. So I see behind you, you've got sort of a net worth growth chart with coins. Now, I noticed that. This is a good one to look at on YouTube, but Ruth has behind her these yellow bars that look like a bar chart, and she's got coins in each of them. So what does that represent, and what are the coins?
You're very observant, Jackie. I'm not an artist. That is my attempt at art. So I, like many, had a coin jar at home, and New Zealanders travel all over the world all the time. So you always come back from somewhere with a bunch of coins that you know you're never going to spend. You throw them in the jar. And they're all from interesting places. They mean something to me, because I remember when I look at the coin having gone there. And I was having to play around one day with some pieces of wood and all my coins, and the graph that you see behind me represents the growth in our net worth over time. So it starts very, very low at the bottom. I'm looking behind me now with one coin, right up to kind of present day, where our growth and journey we're on, we are year on year on year on year, just growing stronger and stronger. And I have those pretty coins there that I get to look at, which is pretty cool.
Well, it's an excellent graph of compound growth because it does start small. It stays small for quite a while. And then in the last few years, you see an explosion in your net worth.
So for our listeners, visuals help. So if you are just getting started on your journey, late starter or whatever, find some way to like track it visually. I mean, there's a lot of things, a lot of apps and things like that you can do. But even if it's something physical and creative like you did, it is so exciting to watch your net worth grow. Because I remember when I was working towards FI and early retirement, I had a chart. It was on my computer, but it was so cool to update my net worth at the time. I was doing it every month. I don't do it every month now, but that was so motivating for me. So there's a great idea for our listeners.
I use the app Empower. It's not tactile or physical, but it's an easy way to do it. You link your accounts. And then I look back recently, and our journey started in about 2016, 17. And I scrolled back there and I was like, wow, look what's happened. I didn't really look at the time period, but it's really, really changed. And as Jackie always says, when you get curious, you get motivated, you wake up, you overcome all the emotional baggage that you have. It's amazing how fast you can move when you play the game of saving and investing the way J.L. Collins says, or in a simple path to wealth. It becomes a rapid path to wealth, as you can see on the wall behind you. You talk about, however, leading a balanced life. You talk about a balanced financial life and not killing it, working hard to get there fast. I find that interesting. Is that just you, or is that sort of a lifestyle thing in New Zealand?
I think it's a bit of both. This is the beauty of the FI journey, actually. We're not your classic FI, but there is no rule book, which is what I love about financial independence. By the time we really cracked on to financial independence, like, oh my gosh, why didn't we discover this sooner? Right, this is what we're going to do. It was right at a point in our life where we decided to have a child. And it's like, talk about great timing, bad timing. I knew that I wanted to be at home with her, so I gave up my income. So right when we got this knowledge and we knew that money invested would drive us forward quite quickly, right at that point, we gave up one income. However, our daughter turns 18 later this year. And for that entire time, we have either not worked at all, worked part-time, had a very short stint of working full-time. So that whole time we've been in and out of the workforce, the both of us, but still our net worth has grown. And as long as every single month the main expense we have is investing, then we grow. Our income has ebbed and flowed and we just flow with it. But as long as every single month we are living below our means and we are creating that gap and we invest that gap, well, blow me down, we are dangerously close to FI. And that's why I really like blogging about what we are personally doing with our money, because it shows people that, no, you don't have to work a 60-hour week every week. You can have this flexibility in your work, but you can't have, who is it? Is it Paula Pant that says you can have anything you want, but not everything you want? And it's like that. And so we just adjust course based on how much we're working and how much we're earning. We are having just a beautiful life and we get to travel. We've got time in our day for each other, for exercise, for our daughter, for friends, for doing what I'm doing with you today on a Friday morning in New Zealand. So we just think we've found this beautiful balance. There are days when I think, oh, if only I had gone back to work full-time and Johnny full-time as well, we would be fully there by now, but I wouldn't give up the experiences we've had over the last 18 years either. So, because as it stands today, I just work on the blog when I feel like it. I feel like it quite a lot, so I do spend a lot of time on it. And Johnny, my husband, he just works 2 days a week. So collectively as an income, I think we make about $120,000 New Zealand a year, which is probably, you'd have to do the math, maybe 70,000 US dollars a year, 70, 80, 90, something like that. But it's enough. It's more than enough. We're still managing to invest and grow. So it's good. We've found a really nice mix.
And what you're telling us is enough is not a finite target. Enough is not just about money. Enough is about time, life, and money. And it's a moving target. And you can have enough and not be FI. I think that's the message I'm hearing.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Yeah.
I think enough is a really important concept as well, because nobody can define it but you. And so you found the balance. You're spending time with your child. Who would want to trade that? Bill was mentioning some people are running towards FI. And I get it if you have a job that you hate and things like that, but it doesn't always have to be this fast forward. You can enjoy the journey, what's going on. So what did you do before you stopped working or before you started the blog? Like, what was your career?
I've done many things because I'm 51. I've managed to pack a few things in and all over the shop. So straight out of school, I actually trained as a forklift driver and I drove forklifts for a year. Then I also studied to become a veterinary assistant, a vet nurse, so qualified to do that. Then I went off to do my big New Zealand OE, which is your overseas experience where off you go for a couple of years and come back. So I went away for a little bit, came back and thought I need a tertiary qualification. So I went to university and I studied psychology. And midway through my degree, I was getting the student loan. And that was my first not liking this debt business. So I paused for 2 years and I drove 150-ton dump trucks in the mining industry in New Zealand and in Australia. Came back to New Zealand, paid off all my student loan and paid cash for the remaining years of study. So I came out with a psychology degree and a graduate diploma in management. That led me into working in sales and account management and retail development management just out in the corporate world. I did that for many years, and then one day I had a break. I just had enough of work, and I remember sitting in the car park of my office, and I rang Johnny, and it was something we talked about. I was getting a bit over what I was doing. I said, I just think I need to stop. Is that okay with you? And he said, absolutely. So I walked inside, resigned, took 6 months off, and during that time, so Johnny and I have had lots of mini breaks. We've got the money behind us. We're not going to starve to death. We're not being fiscally irresponsible. So I took a break and then I thought, what do I want to do next? And I'm a big fan of talking to people. It's like, Jackie, why are you happy doing what you're doing? Why are you successful? What has worked for you and what hasn't worked? I'm more interested in what has worked, and I'll go and follow you in that direction. So I had a conversation with somebody who was really successful. And I said, here's me. Here's what I'm about. What do you suggest I do? And he said, well, Ruth, if you want to make a lot of money, and I'm in sales, go and sell big things. So I got into the housing industry, into sales of new builds, and loved it. Got really into the design of housing and getting people into their brand new homes, which was amazing. And then my daughter came along. So down tools for 4 solid years it was. And also during that time, unfortunately, the city we lived in, Christchurch, in the South Island in New Zealand, had massive earthquakes and really set the whole city back. So we moved from there. And currently I'm talking to you from gorgeous Central Otago in the lower South Island of New Zealand. And so after 4 years of dealing with that and being a mum, I ended up back in housing. And I did that for a bit, but then I got a phone call one Friday afternoon, both of my parents very, very ill. And so I never went back to work. I had 2 years off dealing with that. And then that all settled down. And a friend of mine, we were doing the school pickup and she was a bit frantic about things. And I'm like, what's happening? And she said, I'm trying to have a holiday, but I've got to get all this stuff done at the office. And I said, can I help? And so I spent 2 weeks working in her office. It was her business. And I never left. And 2 weeks turned into 7 years of part-time work in just an office in my small town. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was the lowest pay I'd ever had, but awesome team of people, lovely customers. I live in a beautiful community. It was just great until last year. I only worked 2 days a week. But I would get to my 2 days of work and I'd think, I've got so many other things I want to do. And work was getting in the way of all the other things I wanted to do. So I handed in my notice there with tears. I was so sad to leave because I genuinely loved it. But the time was right. I had other exciting things I wanted to do with my life. So that's kind of me in 60 seconds or however long that took me.
Well, it's much like Jackie in a way. It sounds like you came from humble means. You've never made the big income. It sounds like in American dollars, it's really never been over 6 figures. You've had a very circuitous, interesting, fascinating, sometimes traumatic path through life. And you woke up in your 30s, you're 51 now, you're going to fire. I mean, in spite of all of this, or because of all of this, you're still going to retire early. Are you setting an example in New Zealand? Because does the FIRE movement really exist there? Or are people still trapped in this 9 to 5, 40-year career down there? Are things moving in the direction of FIRE like what you're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. New Zealand is pretty low key. And so the financial independence community in New Zealand is not staging meetups everywhere. It would be pretty cool if they did, but I'd probably have to organise it, and I'm quite busy doing other things. Alan and Katie Donegan last year came to New Zealand and they started at the top of the country, made their way down, and they had 10 meetups along the way. And heaps of Kiwis that I know through my blog, they went to all these meetups and they all had a blast. So physically, I know the community is out there, but particularly for me online in my inbox, I have talked to thousands of people across New Zealand who are following the path to FI, and I've had the great honour of getting emails from people who have said, I've done it. And they'll email me. I got one the other day saying, Ruth, I couldn't tell anybody else because we don't want to be seen to be gloating, but I've reached my FI number, or I've paid my house off, or I've just handed in my notice. So yes, New Zealand has a financial independence community, but we're just on the down low a little more. We're not quite as bolshy as Americans.
One of the things you said to me in a prior conversation too was you might have been FI, but you had your money in all the wrong places. And we talked about recently on a show in America what we call the middle class trap, where our money is trapped in our home. It may be quote unquote trapped in our 401k or a retirement account where we don't necessarily have access to it unless for there's exceptions or rules that we use until we're 59 and a half. Did you find yourself in a situation like that?
Yes. And what's very common in New Zealand is all your money gets locked up in your house. And so Johnny and I own our home, but our home keeps going up in value. Very strong property markets here. So there's three ways to kind of manage your money here. So owning your own home, that's great, but it only costs you money. It never pays you an income unless you're going to fill all your spare rooms up with people who want to rent them off you. New Zealand has a superannuation scheme. So when anybody in New Zealand reaches the age of 65, no matter your net worth, whether you're broke or a multimillionaire, you all get a universal pension. And it's about $21,000 per person per year gross, slightly higher than that in some instances. So when Johnny and I get to 65, we are each guaranteed that we will get a fortnightly income, which totals out to about $20-something thousand a year. What we also have here in New Zealand, it's called KiwiSaver, and that is our retirement scheme that we pay into. So if I was to work for an employer, I would forfeit a small portion of my salary, 3% is typical, very, very low, into my KiwiSaver scheme, and my employer would match it. So currently it's 3%. In the next year or two, it's going up to 4%. And also the government puts in a tiny amount, but honestly, it's like $260 a year, which is barely anything. So we've got a KiwiSaver scheme, which is encouraging New Zealanders to save themselves, so that when they get to 65, they can get access to their KiwiSaver, and the plan being that the government's going to give you a bit of money guaranteed, and you've also built up quite a big nest egg in your KiwiSaver that you will use little portions of that to top up your weekly, fortnightly, monthly income. So that's how it works here. But of course, people like me who want to retire early, we need that additional pot of cash invested, which we have access to at any time. So Johnny and I, we are still too heavy in real estate. Like, we've got the net worth to fully retire this afternoon, but it's still in the wrong places. So like, our house represents about 55-60% of our net worth, with the rest of it being either in just an ETF fund we can access or into the KiwiSaver, which is locked up until we are 65. But I'm always a work in progress here, because our daughter leaves home next year, and we're going to be, sadly, I'm going to cry a lot, empty nesters. We're working up to downsizing our house because it's a family home. Our family's going to get smaller. She will have to leave the town we're in because it's quite a small town. So our intention is to sell our house, which we own outright, buy a smaller house, release some equity, put that equity into our ETF fund. And at that stage, we should be pretty good to actually fire if we wanted to. So we're very, very close, but we've got some big moves to make to get us over the line.
So I have a few questions. I want to make sure that I'm understanding how the retirement works. So when you say pension, that is the equivalent to the U.S. Social Security system?
Yes, but ours is not means tested at all.
So is a portion of the taxes that you pay go towards the government pension?
Yeah, so the superannuitant, so anybody over the age of 65 in New Zealand who is receiving superannuation, they are paid from current taxpayers' money. So when I pay taxes on my income now, that goes towards helping those people. So yeah, that's how that works.
And our Social Security is not quite means tested yet. The trust fund is about to run out, so we don't know what kind of changes they're going to make. But on the contribution side, you only contribute to Social Security up to a certain dollar amount. I think it's like $170,000. But once you hit that, you no longer pay into Social Security. So our Social Security is equivalent, with a few minor differences, equivalent to your government pension plan. So then you mentioned the KiwiSaver. So the KiwiSaver would be equivalent to our employer-sponsored retirement plan, like a 401k.
Yeah, I think that would be true. Yeah.
There's a lot of differences there, though, Jackie. It's really interesting because one of them that I found fascinating was the money goes into KiwiSaver post-tax. It's more like a Roth, and it comes out untaxed when it comes out. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, so that works like a Roth, which we have an option to do that. What are the other differences that you know of, Bill? Or maybe Ruth, tell us some of the differences in the 401k, which both of them are an employer-sponsored plan. So the U.S. 401k versus a KiwiSaver. Is there any other really big differences?
I don't know your system inside and out, but for here with the KiwiSaver, it is in my name. So if I work for this employer, I'll put in a little part of my wages and they'll match me. Then if I leave and I go and work with another employer, well, I just take my KiwiSaver with me and I just say to them, oh, I'm in this fund, etc. So the only thing the employer really has to do with it is they put in their 3%. That's about it, really.
And it's a government-required match, as I understand it, and it is portable from job to job. It's also anybody that works has access to this KiwiSaver. Unlike in the United States, not everybody has access to a 401k, for example. So you have pretty much universal access if you're working. It functions like a Roth, which I found also fascinating.
There's one other fascinating thing about it. It's voluntary. So if you don't want to be in KiwiSaver, you can opt out. The government very much encourages and doesn't push, but is saying to people, if you think you're going to get to 65 and be able to survive on the superannuation alone, you're going to have another thing coming. So they really encourage you to do it, but it is voluntary. But the other thing about it, when it was first started, it was just because they realized that New Zealanders were not saving enough for retirement. But a few years in, New Zealanders started to see their KiwiSaver balance build, and then they're like, but I want to buy a house and I have not saved up any money myself, but look, I've saved some in KiwiSaver. I want it. And so it moved to being a scheme that you can drain your KiwiSaver account, your retirement account, to buy your first home only. And so all the banking industry really got on board with this because they're like, brilliant, here's a deposit. So drain the KiwiSaver. Who cares about their retirement, and get them into housing? I teach my daughter about money. She's already got a KiwiSaver account. I signed her up when she was born. And I'm saying to her, this is for retirement, which is a long, long way away for her. But never drain it. Just add to it. You'll only ever have to add a little bit from every single paycheck. Retirement's sorted for her already if she sticks to this plan. And I just have to cross my fingers that in 10 years' time, she doesn't drain it to buy a house and then have to start again on her retirement savings.
So you were able to start a KiwiSaver for your child? That's not just for working adults?
My first trip out of the house, Jackie, after I'd had my daughter, was to the post office to mail away her application to a KiwiSaver retirement fund. Yeah, she's been in it since birth.
That's a huge difference because we aren't really able to do that. Maybe a 529 college savings would be something similar, but that's interesting. Is there an age limit that you can take this money out of the KiwiSaver other than for buying a home?
So no, it's 65. So the only time you get it out is to buy a home, or if you're under hardship. So if you are in real financial dire straits, but you've got money in your KiwiSaver account, there are a lot of rules attached to it to prove that you're really struggling, but you can get it out if you are in financial dire straits, but it's hard to do.
One thing I found interesting about this too is that although it's sort of government administered, it's managed by private providers that are accredited with the government. And I went into the website you talked about earlier, Sorted, I think it is, and I started looking at what investments you have available to you, and I was a little disappointed because it seemed to be funds, actively managed funds. There's a limited choice, and they were higher cost. Is that your experience with this too?
You are very onto the money there, Bill. Yeah, absolutely. We've got a range of, I think, 32 KiwiSaver providers, and each provider has created their funds to appeal to all parts of the market. And some have got crypto, and some have got property, and some have got shares, and some have got an index fund and that sort of thing. So it's a real pick and mix of what's available. So what I had to do over here was work out, well, okay, how can I invest my KiwiSaver money into an index fund, ETF fund that aligns with what the financial independence community is on about, which is investing in just a massive global fund, such as down here, a total world fund. So they are available, those funds, you can get them, but not every provider offers them. And you have to find the specific provider who offers the specific fund that you're after. But yeah, a lot of active management, a lot of high fees. If you're looking for a KiwiSaver fund, you need to look for a fee under 0.5%, which for you guys, you'll be like, oh my gosh, 0.5, this is so high. Whereas here in New Zealand, anything below 0.5, you're doing okay. But I was actually looking at a provider yesterday out of interest, and in the personal finance space here, investing space, it's a lot of big companies. There was one particular company that kept getting mentioned, and I thought, oh, I'll go and dig into the back end of their website. 3.3% fees they were charging.
Oh my God, my head just exploded. Oh my gosh, that's
I know. I know.
That
It is an interesting landscape to sort out because I didn't find any really low cost funds. And then you have to look under the hood, sort of universally available, 32 different providers, all have different approaches, but they're packaging mostly actively managed funds. There's not a lot of passive investing available that I saw in my brief perusal through that website and through some of the companies. Is that your experience? I mean, I was shocked.
Yes, welcome to the world. And that's why my blog is so handy for people, because I've done all the research and made my decisions, and I write about that. And so I say to people, this is where I went, this is what I discovered, and this is why I am doing what I am doing. And then I say, go and compare my situation with yours. What's standing out to you? The fees are higher than mine, this, that, and the next thing, super actively managed, et cetera, et cetera. So, because that's what I found here. Like, I can't go out and say, buy this fund with this company, because that's sort of seen to be giving financial advice. I can't do that, but by sharing my experience and all of my evaluation as to why I'm doing what I'm doing, people can deduce for themselves what might be appropriate for them. So all that to say, there are a couple of providers here that offer the funds that align with the financial independence community's take on things. And with my session I'll be doing with Alan and Katie Donegan on Rebel Finance School, we're going to specifically dig into what is available here in New Zealand in an effort to create a tool to make it easier for every other Kiwi to find the appropriate fund, whether that be an ETF fund outside of KiwiSaver or something inside KiwiSaver.
Wow, that is fascinating. So you literally are saving people thousands by sharing what you did and encouraging them to be curious and to look at the different funds and to make proactive decisions about what they're investing in and understand what they're investing in. In the US, perhaps we're a little bit further along in terms of low cost fees, because in the US, you can get a US total stock index fund for like 0.03%, maybe even less. So it's really low, but you have learned that and now you're sharing it with others. So kudos there. But I feel like the theme is still the same. There's a lot of high fees products and investments out there. If you're in the US, it's employer specific. So every employer will have to pick their own. So there's no universal place to go to look at the funds.
There's advantages and disadvantages because in many ways I came away from it saying, this seems like a scam. The government approving these companies, select few companies, they're not administering their own TSP, for example. And I don't know if you have a TSP, thrift savings plan that the government administers for federal employees, the military, that has some of the best funds out there. And they're doing in a way what New Zealand is doing from a public sector standpoint that we don't have access to. And why don't we all have access to it? Why isn't there an umbrella like this where we can have access to the best low-cost funds, but we have to get private industry involved because they got to make their cut? And that's kind of what the government is supporting there.
We used to have more superannuation schemes which were employer-based. So like if you had a state sector employer, government employer, they used to have a fund. But over the years, when KiwiSaver came in and started to grow, all those funds are getting wound down. There's very few of them available anymore. So now it is very much you pay into your KiwiSaver and you get your superannuation at 65. And it's the me and the personal finance side of things that adds that different flavour of adding in my own ETF fund, which is all in my own name. I'm doing my own thing, and that is the kind of icing on the cake of the other things I've got going on.
You're talking about sort of a post-tax brokerage account, right? Do you have low-cost providers for your brokerage accounts there? With the emphasis on KiwiSaver, people might forget that the best access they're going to have to the lowest cost funds are often going to be, since your KiwiSaver is post-tax anyway, why not forego KiwiSaver to find the things and do it all on a brokerage account?
People would pay into KiwiSaver because of that employer match. You are putting in 3% and they are putting in 3%, which is in addition to your wages. And then it used to be that the government would pay in more each year, but successive governments keep lowering the government contribution. So like more recently, because I'm self-employed now, I could pay into my KiwiSaver voluntarily if I wanted to, but I've actually chosen to stop. Like there's no benefit to me putting any more money into my KiwiSaver because, like you say, it's my after-tax income. I would put that in there. It locks it up till 65. I don't have an employer, so they're not adding anything. And all the government is adding is $260 a year. And I decided that having my money tied up till I'm 65 just to get the $260 from the government, to me, that just doesn't make sense to me anymore. So therefore, I take that same after-tax income and I do invest it in an accessible ETF fund. So still after tax. And New Zealand has they call it a very flat tax structure. It's very easy to work within and easy to understand. So that's the way to go about it over here. And a lot of the KiwiSaver providers here will offer funds accessible outside of KiwiSaver. They'll have the same funds. One is locked away and one is outside KiwiSaver. But to your point, Bill, a lot of those funds are still the actively managed high fee funds, and I don't want any of those.
Do you have any pre-tax options where you have tax-free growth?
We're different to you and different to Australia in the fact we don't have capital gains tax or anything like that. So my house here, it cost us $430,000 when we built it. Now it's worth close to $1 million. So if I sold it tomorrow, I don't pay any tax on that gain. So we don't have capital gains tax here in New Zealand, which is quite the big deal. And it's the same with investments. So like if I bought $100,000 worth of investments and I sold them for $200,000, I don't pay any capital gains tax on that difference. The only tax we pay on our investments are on the dividends or the distributions. And by the very nature of a ETF fund, they pay very low distributions of like 1.8%. So really, if I had a $100,000 investment and it paid me out a $1,800 dividend, I only pay tax on that $1,800. And so the tax rate, I get to nominate what my appropriate tax rate is. So I just pay my small amount of tax, which in my case is 17.5% on that $1,800 dividend. So win some, lose some. You have these tax advantaged accounts. We don't have that, but we don't have a capital gains tax.
So you've got your house where you have a huge gain on it. Let's say if it was worth $2 million, there's no limit to where, oh, wow.
There are one or two rules there. Like if you were a trader and you bought a house today and sold it in 6 months and made a huge gain, in those instances, you would be paying a capital gains tax. But that's not me, and that's not what I'm doing. And it's the same with shares. So like if I was a share trader, that they could see that I was buying at breakfast time and selling at lunchtime repeatedly, then there might be a capital gains tax to pay. But by the nature of people in our community, we are buy and hold investors. So we will buy and hold, and then we'll reach a point where once a month, once every 6 months, once a year, we will sell off a little slither from the top, but we don't pay capital gains tax on that type of investing.
The tour that the Donegans did was called the Great Pie Tour. And there is something called a portfolio investment entity in New Zealand. It's a complicated structure, but can you give us just a high-level overview of what a pie is in New Zealand?
Sure. So in New Zealand, you pay tax on your income, and it's based on what you earn, and there's different tax brackets. So I couldn't tell you what they are, but like you've got a tax rate of 17.5%. Then I can't even remember what they are, but they go as high as 33 or higher. So if you're a high income earner, you would be paying 33% income tax. A pie is capped at 28%. So if I was a higher income earner and I used a pie investment, but my personal tax rate was 33%, I wouldn't pay that on my pie. It's capped at 28%. So I've got that 5% win. So that's what they're for. Someone like me, they're not that big a benefit because my tax rate is lower anyway, and they are taxed at 28%. I'm still in pie funds, and I do pay a higher tax rate, but I claw that back at the end of the financial year. And like you guys, I laugh every year when I hear it on your podcast that you have a day in the year that you've got to file your taxes. And we don't do that here. We've got the Inland Revenue, the government tax department. And when you have an employer, that links back through to them. I have shares that links back through to them. So they do the math for me. Most instances, you never have to file a tax return in New Zealand because of this nice flat tax structure. They've got all the information they need. They know that throughout the year, oh, here we go, Ruth has invested in this fund here. She's paid 28% tax on the returns. Remember, it's only that returns. Oh, but her tax rate's only 17.5%. Oh, okay, let's give her that refund, and I'll either get a refund or they'll just offset it against some tax I needed to pay elsewhere. So tax in New Zealand is not a headache like it is for you guys.
Wow. So you don't have to file a tax return at all. Yeah, we have to do it every year, April 15th, no matter what, even though a lot of the transactions, the government does have those transactions, but then there's deductions and tax credits and all these complicated things that we have with our taxes. And it's about to get more complicated.
Yeah. No, we do not have any of that. So, and I have to remind myself, it's like, oh gosh, it's end of financial year, isn't it? Because I run my blog as a wee business and there's a wee bit I have to do with that, but it's not a big deal, not a big deal. It was interesting because my daughter came home from school. Fascinating. You know this, the two of you talking to your children about money. She came home from school recently and she's like, my friend's got a tax return. So without these young people even knowing it, bing, money turned up in their bank account as a refund, and they got a letter from the IRD saying, here is a $100 tax return. And she's like, why did they all get a tax return and I didn't get one? And that's where I got the opportunity to explain to her, look, they have overpaid tax somewhere. The government has done the math and they're giving it back to them again. And it's like, much like in America, you don't want to be getting a big tax return because it means that you have overpaid your tax. You want to be paying the right amount of tax. So
I found that your superannuation system is also interesting too because it's residency based. It's not based on sort of an earnings based system like we have. And you get your money after 65. We're able to take it early and get it at 62. We're also able to let it grow on an inflation adjusted basis until we're 70. And yours is a flat rate that grows according to CPI or something like that, right?
That's right. Whether you're worth nothing or a lot, you will get the same amount. And from time to time, they have the conversation here, should we means test the superannuation payment at 65? Because some people are receiving it. It's pocket money. They don't need it. But they decide that the cost of means testing the entire population would outweigh the cost of just paying everybody everything. And I guess they figure that Sarah Smith is really well sorted with millions of dollars. She'll just go and spend the superannuation money in the economy, which will help our economy. I think that might be their thinking behind it.
Well, I find the differences between philosophies, cultures, and countries fascinating, and how governments operate in different areas. You don't really understand your own system until you look outside of your system and realize how other people see it, and the pluses and the minuses, as we've talked about today. We have so much in common, and the FIRE movement is growing on your end of the world. It's a little bit younger, it seems, than it is here, but thanks to you, it's growing. The independent-minded, humble, under the radar screen millionaires next door. You're all friends with them there because it's a small population, right? You must know everybody.
I do know a lot of people. Our population here is like 5.2 million people. You're like 330 million. So I'm not surprised that you have more complexity over there. And like, we are fortunate in the fact we are 3 islands, 2 big ones and a little one, but we run the same rules across the whole country. So we've got one government telling the whole country these are the rules, so we don't have all that state stuff going on that you've got. But lift the hood of my inbox, and in there is a lot of people still keeping it to themselves and sharing it with me, doing okay, working stuff out, which is cool. People in the financial independence community are just the nicest people you'll ever meet. They're awesome. And they're all from different walks of life, doing all sorts of different things. Yeah, I wish they would be louder about what they're doing and what they're achieving so that others could see that it's possible for them as well, but they like to keep it a bit quiet.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you bearing with us and sort of educating us, because it is truly fascinating to see how other countries do it. But the full circle thing is that your FI journey and the whole concept of financial independence and or retiring early is kind of the same. You created enough of a gap in your life to where you could take that extra time off, to where you could walk away when you were ready to walk away. And even though you may not have been fully able to retire early, you took your breaks. You enjoyed time with your child. You were able to do so many things just by reaching financial independence or getting to at least have FU money, like Jill Collins said, and it just creates a better life. And the product of that, what I see as sort of one of the final, I guess, gifts that you've given so many other people is you created enough margin in your life to where you were able to create the happy saver. And you're touching not just New Zealanders. We've got a lot of US people that are listening to you. And it's truly amazing when you're able to use the creative side of your brain and not feel so to a job. Sometimes you might like it, sometimes not. But the way that you have expressed your creativity to where it benefits others, I applaud you. And I love to see this in the FI community.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. And that's what I love about financial independence. It's the time I put into my blog, the volunteer hours I put into my blog are huge. And I just think, what a luxury that I can do that. This is time I could be working a job, earning some money per hour, but I would sit here all day long. This is what I want to do. I want to help people get ahead. And I don't know who said it, somebody else in this space. It's like, for me to win financially, you don't have to lose. And that's the beauty of this community, that if I can just share the whole know your net worth, budgeting, have an emergency fund, get out of debt, blah, blah, blah. If I can share that simple message, because it is just a simple message that so many people haven't heard yet, if I can keep plugging away with blogs and podcasts and talking one-on-one with people, the fire is spreading, as they say. I can't see myself stopping anytime soon, and it's just quite the privilege to be doing what I'm doing, basically.
I mean, you are the happy saver. Some of our late starters aren't so happy. What do you have for the new listeners that are new to the journey to inspire them to join us and realize that they can do it too?
I think the key is community. Like, it's finding people who are where you want to go. And like when I was saying to Jackie before, if I sat down with her, I want to learn what made her successful. And it's very easy to walk out your front gate and talk to people who are like, oh, Trump's in charge, the economy's this, everybody's a bit down on their luck. There's plenty of them out there. Stop talking to those people. Find the people like you two, like myself, who are happy, who are achieving the goals they've set themselves, and all of our goals are different, and surround yourself with people who are going to places where you want to be. That's what I would say to people.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's beautiful. That is awesome.
Yeah, words of wisdom. Now, Ruth, where can people find you to learn more about you and to get all of this knowledge that you've been sharing with us today?
So my blog and my website is called thehappysaver.com. My podcast is also called The Happy Saver. And if you go to my blog, I have a newsletter. And every fortnight when I put out a new blog that I've written, I always have an email where just things I've picked up over the last fortnight I put in there, like I often link to you guys and the things you write and that sort of thing. It is obviously very New Zealand centric, but it is a global community as well. So I'm always just trying to link to useful things to help other people in the hope that I've linked to something that's that little nugget of wisdom that lands with them, that sends them off on a journey to find more information. So yeah, The Happy Saver, that's where you can find me.
I'm a subscriber and I disagree a little bit. I think a lot of what you talk about is universal and would apply to an American audience. Yes, there's the specific programs that are different, but the messaging and the tactics and the things that you need to do to get where we all want to go, time, freedom, are very similar. So I would encourage people to sign up for your blog, listen to your podcast where you read the stories of your listeners on air. And I find the stories are where we learn the most, and they're the most inspirational. So the stories may be different in New Zealand and the US, but we learn from every story. And so please check out The Happy Saver. Ruth, thank you for being with us here today. This has been fantastic. I spent half of my day with you today, and I can't wait to meet you in person on my journey to New Zealand.
One day you've both got to get here. Like when any Kiwi says to an American, when you come to New Zealand, look me up, come and visit. They genuinely mean it. So yeah, I look forward to having you down here. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I love chatting to you guys.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week on Catching Up to Fi.
So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. Our social media maven is Diana Falk, and our editor is Fritz Brizard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to Fi. Cheers.